Okay. Good evening, commissioners and staff and members of the audience. I'd like to call this meeting to order. The Historic Preservation Commission regular meeting of July 10th, 2024. Nice to see everybody here after a few-month break. And I will start the meeting by reading the Native Land Acknowledgement Statement for tonight. We wish to acknowledge that Tempe is the homeland of the Native people who have inhabited this landscape since time immemorial. These ancestral lands of the O'odham, known as the Pima, Peepash, known as the Maricopa, and their ancestors extend far beyond our city. This land continues to be spiritually connected to the O'odham of the Salt River, Pima Maricopa Indian Community, and Gila River Indian Community. We accept the responsibility of stewarding those places and solemnly pledge to consider this commitment in every action. All right. Well, thank you, and we'll take a roll call now, please.
Commissioner Davis?
Here.
Vice Chair Fackler? Vice Chair Fackler?
I'm here.
Okay. Commissioner Karuka?
Here.
Commissioner Lamp?
Here.
Commissioner Melcher? I believe I saw her online.
She does appear to be online.
Here, I'm
Okay.
sorry, my computer wasn't working with me.
Oh, no problem. Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. Commissioner Justice?
I'm here.
All right. Commissioner Robinson is absent, she told me. Commissioner Williams?
Here.
Welcome. And Chair Woodson.
Present.
All right. Welcome all. One absent, 8 members. So we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Lechner. And also I'd like to welcome Ms. Melcher to the commission. This is your first official meeting with us, and we see you online there. So thank you for joining us tonight. And also Ms. Abney from the museum. Thank you for coming tonight. Good to see you. Okay. Moving on to call to audience, agenda item 1. Are there any persons that are wishing to address the commission tonight? We don't have anybody for that. Okay. All right, thank you. And moving on, agenda item 2, approval of the meeting minutes from the April 10th, 2024 meeting. And commissioners, you have the meeting minutes in your packet, and if there's anyone who has any questions, comments, or edits, go ahead and raise your hand or go forth and proceed.
I have one edit. On page 3, the first word says commission justice. As cool as that would be, should be commissioner. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Any other edits, comments? No, hearing none. If I could get a motion for approval of the minutes.
This is Commissioner Williams. I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. And we'll take a vote on this.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that's 8 in favor, none against. Motion passes.
Very well. Good. Thank you very much. And thank you, commissioners. Okay, agenda item 3, approval of the agenda. I don't believe we need to make any amendments tonight after we just discussed this, so I'll just move to approve the agenda unless there's any objections. Agenda approved. Moving on, item 4, review of National Register of Historic Places nomination for the Hayden Flour Mill and Silos located at 119 South Mill Avenue. And the presenter is online, I believe. Yes or no?
We could come back to that one.
There's
if you want
there's
to.
a call-in user. I'm not sure who that might be, but
Okay.
okay,
We could also just move. We could just move ahead to the next one as well.
very well. All right, well, we'll table that for the moment and move on to item 5. Presentation on city pilot program installing armrests in 2 alcoves of the Old Mill Avenue Tempe Bridge, a Tempe Historic Property Registered designated structure. And I believe you said there's Miss Wright is present online to present. Yes?
Is that correct, Jennifer? Okay, very good.
Okay, very good. Miss Wright, welcome to the meeting. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. You can proceed with your presentation.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you inviting me here to present on behalf of the Community Health and Human Services Department. I have a co-presenter who's not able to be here today with Kip Carroll. His supervisor, Shelley, is here to answer any questions afterwards from transportation and sustainability. And so I'm going to do my best to share everything I can on the person side of things, the outcomes side of things, basically what took place prior to and then after the install of the armrests. So Zach, are my slides up on the screen?
Yes, they are, and I think you should be able to advance them yourself. But if you have trouble with that, just let me know, and I'll do that for you.
Okay, great. I'm not quite seeing how I'm supposed to advance them, so if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, sure.
Thank you. So essentially about 2 years ago, the council and commission brought to the Homeless Solutions Task Force the opportunity for us to come up with some solutions to folks using the alcoves on the Mill Avenue Bridge in ways they were not intended for. So there was much discussion that I know that our Transportation and Sustainability Department can expand on more about different options and ideas that came forth. What we ended up moving forward with was a armrest idea for the alcoves to see if that would impact the way that the alcoves were being used, specifically being so close to traffic breezing by right next to them. So what we did is prior to installing or doing anything, we started with information gathering. So our first bit of information gathering, we started with developing something called a Mill Avenue Walk. Part of my responsibilities in Homeless Solutions and Community Human Services is to oversee our HOPE street outreach team, as well as items related to our city shelters, encampment operations. And so we work very closely with multiple teams in many of these different aspects. What we developed was a daily walk for us to be going through essentially several areas that we identified as areas that are high needs for service and resources. And we included the Mill Avenue Bridge in that. So when we went out daily, we had our HOPE team leading the way to offer resources and services. And then we also went alongside with our officers from Tempe PD. Sometimes it was community responders from Tempe PD. And occasionally we were able to have Care 7 as well join us out there on the squad. And even sometimes their security teams from within the community. So daily this occurred between about 6 a.m. and 7:30 a.m. And so what we saw, next slide, please. We took some information as we started this information gathering for about 6 weeks. So in that 6-week time period, we were able to go out on these mill walks 34 times as we were getting it established. So out of those 34 mill walks that we had on the bridge specifically, half of those we had an opportunity to offer individuals resources and services through our HOPE team. So essentially 17 out of 34 of those walks resulted in folks that we were able to encounter and engage in one way or another in the alcoves with offering services and to lead with service. In those 6 weeks, when we were taking a look at that data, we saw that just over 30% of those engagements with individuals were happening on the 4 northernmost alcoves of the bridge, while just about 70% were happening on the 4 southernmost alcoves of the bridge. So we made a determination within our task force when we were given the go-ahead by this commission to go ahead and install a pilot to see if that would impact, again, the way that the armrests were being used. And we made a determination then, because we were seeing the heaviest use on the 4 southernmost alcoves, to install the armrests, or that our Transportation and Sustainability Department install those armrests there on those southernmost 4 alcoves. So there are 2 on the east and 2 on the west side. And next slide, please. So we went back and forth with some designs on the armrests to make them just very safety focused. And I know that our Transportation and Sustainability team can maybe expand a little bit more on that. And what we did then is we started to gather data. We got them installed, and then we started taking information as we continued our mill walks. So from November 1st to May 31st, we went out for 7 solid months, and every single day ensured that there was a mill walk done by our team put together that we already talked about. So in those mill walks, what we saw, staying in that same time frame, during that time, 27 out of the 213 walks resulted in folks being present that we could offer resources and services to from Community Health and Human Services. A total of really 44 folks on that. When we were doing that outreach, what we also saw is out of those 7 months, approximately 30% of those engagements were also on the north side of the bridge, where approximately 70% were on the south side of the bridge. Next slide, please. So this does give a little bit better of a comparison side by side of what you can see overall from our pilot, basically gathering information on the left-hand side of the screen prior to the installation of the armrests. And then on the right-hand side of the screen is when the armrests were installed on the 4 southernmost alcoves. You'll see the little star in the middle of the screen. That really kind of signifies where the center of that bridge is and where we divided the line for engagements based on north and south of the bridge. And so what we ended up resulting in seeing is that the overall number of engagement opportunities that we had reduced on our mill walks. From 50% of those walks having opportunities for engagements with the HOPE team to 12.7% as we continued for the ongoing 7 months from November to May. The pattern, however, of use stayed very consistent. You can see it from prior to installation to during installation on those southernmost 4 alcoves. And so really, this is the information that we have to present in regards to what we found both prior to the installation and what's happening currently. And I want to just share a couple of things that it could attribute to, in addition to obviously the installation of those armrests. So a trend that we see sometimes with consistent outreach in locations with the HOPE team is really one of 2 things. So overall, when our HOPE team is out engaging, which we did, obviously we've been going for over a year now, to consistently go to the same space for within an hour to 2 hour time frame on a daily basis. That typically results in one of 2 things on top of the architectural design that we've altered here. First, ongoing rapport building and trust building with individuals oftentimes leads to individuals accepting services with our HOPE team, saying yes to shelter, saying they're willing to go and move with us to a housing opportunity. So that can be a portion of what is attributed there to the reduction in number of engagements. HOPE literally working very, very hard to identify and find a home for individuals using that space as a home to move to. Also, when we have consistent engagement in locations and areas, we also know that individuals that are not wanting to accept services or are not wanting to engage with us often engage for a period of time. And if they're not interested in engaging ongoing with us or accepting the services, oftentimes we see move to other locations or resolve their homelessness in other ways. So I'd say overall in the city of Tempe, we've also had very clear data metrics from both our 2022 to our 2023 point in time counts, as well as two different data metrics in our homeless management information system, which is a national system, but is used regionally to input, track, and just keep data regarding work and services and individuals experiencing homelessness. All of those metrics have been showing a 30% or more reduction in homelessness in the city of Tempe as well. So I think all of those metrics combined is a lot of information to share and present here for you all to consider on what the next steps would be really here for these alcoves. And really with that, that's what I had to share, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and pass it over to Shelley to expand any more as well.
Thank you,
Our
Jessica.
commission is right. Oh, okay. Shelley,
Oh.
do you need to go ahead?
You know what? I don't really have too much to say. I haven't been overly involved, but I wanted to represent our department. Apologize that Kip wasn't able to be here tonight. He had an emergency. And so Jessica and I talked this morning, and I'm happy to answer any questions about historical information of kind of why we got to this point, but turn it over to all of you.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming here tonight to provide the presentation. We appreciate the effort and the information. So I'm going to turn it over to the commissioners first to ask any questions if they have any. So commissioners, Vice Chair.
One quick question that I have is can we go back, put that last graphic, the bridge one up? That's it. Thank you. It appears from this graphic, especially the November 23 through May 24, is that 70% of the engagements on the south, those engagements appear not to be at the alcoves. They appear to be elsewhere on the bridge, along the sidewalks and whatnot, or even off the bridge. Is that shown correctly?
So I was anticipating somebody bringing that up, and thank you for doing that. I actually should have brought that up prior. Most of these engagements, if not all, are happening at these alcoves. When we have the Hope team there, if somebody declines service with us, we do step away and give them some space, and then we log that engagement into our application. We try to be very person focused in the way that we approach people, because we know that those folks that we're approaching are often in some of the worst days of their life, having a very traumatic or crisis time right at that time. So if somebody says no or declines, we oftentimes don't stand right there at that alcove to log that engagement on the application. We will step away a little bit so that we can get it safely logged and just continue on with the service that we're offering. One other key piece of this is that that bridge itself is something that has to be walked versus obviously driven, because the way that the Hope vehicles aren't able to be pulled over on the bridge. So just managing safety first is, I think, the key thing there.
Follow-up question, if you will. Again, from the engagements on the south side of the bridge, what have you seen as far as the maintenance requirements during this period? Were they significantly reduced, or were they about what we saw before they went in?
And that would be a question I'd need to defer probably to Shelley to respond to.
Definitely. Thank you, Vice Chair, Chair, Commissioners. We continue to power wash and maintain those on at least a weekly basis. I would say prior to the installation, sometimes it was needed daily, but we aren't really increasing that frequency at this time. We've kind of maintained the same. They do need to be washed out if, the homeless are in the alcoves. So that really has not changed.
Okay, my final question, if you will. and this really comes down to your experience with the design of the armrests themselves. Always concerned that not with the mounting seemed to be extremely well designed and stable, but have you experienced anything negative as far as the leverage of the armrests themselves and any damage to the armrests?
Thank you for that additional question. So you may know that the first prototype that we had used was actually, we weren't successful. It wouldn't really stay attached. So we moved to a different one. They're clamped on. Haven't seen any damage to those, but honestly would need to check in more with our staff of what they're seeing. It hasn't been reported to me and it hasn't been reported to KIP. So my, conclusion would be that we're not seeing damage to them, that they're staying in place. And I don't know, Jessica, if any of your members have seen anything different.
I can't speak to anything any damage wise. However, I can say when I went and checked last week, I drove it myself just to ensure that I had clear speaking points here, and everything was still intact in the same way that it was installed from my observation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair. Any other questions from commissioners? Yes, proceed.
Do you have any photos of the installation? What they look like?
I think there was one photo on the packet that showed them on there, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
A couple of photos.
And just to be clear, they're only installed on the 4 alcoves on the south side, or which ones are they installed on?
That's correct. The 4 alcoves on the south end of the bridge. So there's 2 on the east south side and 2 on the west south side.
Okay. And so just a couple of clarification questions. So you're showing a relatively significant decrease in your, percentage of engagements over that period from November to May. Would you say that it was a sort of steady decrease month to month of your engagements, or was there any pattern to that at all? Did you see it having a better effect over time, or was it just kind of random?
So I looked for a pattern. Thank you for that question. It's a very good one. I looked for a pattern in that, and there was not one that I could identify to share with you all today.
Okay. But it's the overall period of time, you're still showing a significant decrease. And those are the active engagements that are at the alcoves, and that includes all 8 alcoves?
That is correct.
Okay. And so on the ones that had the installations, just, I guess, even anecdotally, could you share, was there any difference in how you were engaging or finding folks there? Were they not using it the same extent or something to that degree as they were before the installations? Or could you maybe give some sort of, your own sort of perspective or observations on that?
Sure. I'll share with the group. When our team is out doing outreach, oftentimes we do find folks that are sleeping or using areas to sit up and rest. I think that the individuals that we did find there, often I don't believe they were laying down. There isn't much of an opportunity to do so with those there. However, when somebody is extremely heat exhausted, has been in the elements for a long time, some place to lean up into, lean to, sit and lean on, can be a place that somebody can actually find a significant amount of rest. So I would say that folks sitting and resting was also seen there when we were out and engaging with individuals. Folks were able to sleep sitting up, I guess, is one of the things I'll say there.
All right. And then I guess in conjunction with that observation, were you seeing any decrease with sort of accumulation of trash or debris or whatever, clothing, furniture, or whatever kind of the, issues you were having before the installations? Did you notice any significant difference there?
That's not something that our Hope Outreach team is tracking. Shelley may be able to respond a little bit better to that. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know that we've seen a decrease in the amount of trash that we've seen there. But that would be something that I would need to verify with the staff who does do that work. Certainly I can get back with you on that one, and I apologize for not having more information on this. Jessica contacted me this morning, no fault of hers. So I'm not as prepared as I wanted to be, for sure.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think that, I mean, ideally, I'd like at some point to see more information on that, because I remember last year when we were having these discussions, and I forgot the gentleman's name who came to speak with us, that was one of the major concerns. It wasn't just folks in there, but it was just the significant amount of trash and debris and the cleanup. Like you were saying, you were having to do it like daily.
Mhm.
What you're saying now is that it's really only weekly, and that's a sufficient level of maintenance frequency?
Yes, and sometimes though we will receive reports of needing to clean them out, and so of course we respond to those as well. And I don't know if it was Isaac Shavira who came and talked with you all. Yeah, so he was the transportation maintenance manager, and he at the time, and he has moved on to another position in another city. So we did not have a lot of information with that, but I actually have his contact information, so I can get additional information from him and then reach out to our staff who again are cleaning that and see if we've noticed a change.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. And maybe just sort of to wrap up my questions here, I guess, would you now say then, with having made these observations the last year, would you say that you feel like these installations are working the way they intended to work? Or do you find that it's just as much attributable to the fact that you're doing these walks on basically a daily basis?
I apologize. My audio cut out for a moment. Can you please repeat that if you were asking from a response from me?
Right. Yeah. I'd just like to know from your sections and the folks who are involved in this project, do you feel like the installed armrests are working as they intended to produce the desired outcome? Or do you feel like it's just as much or more a result of the increase in your walks that you're basically doing on a daily basis, it sounds like now?
Thank you for allowing me to share that. I would say that I don't have anything to attribute at this point to the armrests having much of an influence, because co- the reduction was consistent across all 8 of the alcoves. However, oftentimes trends and what we've seen in our practices and in best practices are increased engagement and increased presence often leads to increased successes with housing folks, as well as folks that are maybe using spaces as they shouldn't be, removing themselves from the areas so that they're not engaged by human services or the police.
Okay, very well. And I guess ultimately the intention is to, hopefully, help people get back to a point and that they can, be more self-sufficient with their lives. So I guess that's a positive aspect. So then with what we've now seen, are you and your section recommending that the city continue to move forward with these installations? And are you seeking to install them in the other alcoves, or what's your proposal from here?
Actually, I think we, as a task force, we're looking for guidance from this commission. We did not have any conclusive things to point to for continuing to install. However, there was that overall reduction and those pieces to consider. So we're asking actually for some direction on that.
Okay. Commissioners, any other input? Vice Chair?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a recommendation to the board that we allow the program to continue as is, with 4 of these alcoves being outfitted with armrests, and see what next year brings. Because I agree, it's inconclusive right now that the the armrests are any kind of deterrent, and they may be totally unnecessary.
That's a possibility. And I guess I should remark that from my perspective, I still feel like from an impact to the historical architecture, it still seems like it's not adversely affecting that, other than the fact that there is an added element to the alcove, but it doesn't seem like it's, you're not having any problems with damage to the concrete there or anything like that, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, I don't see an issue with continuing to use them and for you to continue to use your approach and find out if it continues to work for you. And I guess last question would be, will you be continuing these kind of walks in that area as we move forward, or was this just part of this 1-year evaluation period?
Well, we did start it as in congruence with this evaluation period. So while I anticipate it being something we can do, I would say that that's something I do need to take back to our department to ensure we can get a yes from all of the departments and pieces that are involved, because those are commitments from multiple folks and divisions.
Understood. Okay. All right, unless there's any further questions from the commissioners, we will thank you for bringing this to our attention. And was there anything else that you would like to hear from us on this matter today?
No,
Nothing go ahead, Jessica. Sorry.
No, I had nothing else. Just thank you so much for the opportunity to share this with you all.
Very
Yes,
good.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I will
And-
say I can commit on behalf of our department to try to gather additional data should Human Services agree to continue with that, so that we could come back to you if you would like and maybe present a better picture on the maintenance side for sure.
And then Ms. Seiler, too, feel free to, any information you gather, you can also email that to me as well, and I can disseminate that to the commission, and we could from that make a determination whether the commission would like you to return.
I can certainly do that. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. It looks like Ms. Levstick is online, so shall we go back to agenda item 4? Ms. Levstick, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you guys hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect.
So
Well,
we
thanks,
have,
everyone.
yes, and so we have your materials, and if you'd like to proceed with your presentation, we'll listen to what you have brought for us today.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Zachary. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I know mine was being tried while I was trying to download the app in order to give a presentation to you. So sorry for the delay. As mentioned in the previous slide, you've all had the opportunity to read a draft nomination that will be reviewed this Friday for the Historic Sites Review Committee meeting in Phoenix. So we're looking forward to seeing the review committee's comments and approval of the National Register nomination. You can go ahead and move on to the next slide if you can. So my goal again, you guys have a very busy agenda, so my goal is to kind of keep this brief and open it up for questions. So I wanted to take a little opportunity to just, again, do a brief overview of the project, talk a little bit about the nomination process itself, kind of the some of the recommendations that we arrived at, and also talk a little bit about the boundary, which is sort of a critical piece of this project. And also just, again, provide a project update as well on the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit application. So as noted in the first bullet point, this is the first phase of a two-phase project. So my role in this project is to draft and prepare a National Register nomination to get the Hayden Flour Mill listed in the National Register. And that's an important piece of this project in order to go after the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit, which the developer and client plans to do. In order to make that possible, the property has to be listed in the National Register of Historic Places. And so my role in this, again, as I said, is to prepare the nomination, but also make sure that I prepare a nomination that will support the eventual redevelopment of the Hayden Flour Mill. And so it's important that the work that I do is in concert with the rehabilitation tax credit application team members as well. And again, I can talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But for now, if you want to go to the next slide, I'll talk about the next two bullet points here on the list. So two of the kind of critical components of writing a National Register nomination, and again, I'm sorry for anybody that's written nominations, and I'm just sort of, being redundant here for information you already know, but for anybody that doesn't, this might be useful, is one of the things that we have to identify when we write National Register nominations is period of significance. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm assuming that all of you on the Historical Commission are very well versed in the history of Hayden Flour Mill and all things Hayden Flour Mill. So you're all very familiar with this property. And so, the period of significance is really critical, not only for the historic nomination, but also for that tax credit application, because when they're doing rehabilitation, the time period 1918 and 1966 in this case is really, really critical to what they can and cannot do with this property from here on out. And so we've arrived at this period of significance in part because this denotes the reconstruction of the mill building, which is the mill building you see today, to the last date of alterations to that property, or to the mill building, I should say, in 1966. So we're really kind of bookending the major changes to the mill as well as the silos and the grain elevator. And so even though, as we see in this picture, from the 1880s, the original 1874 flour mill is no longer survives. It burned down in a fire in 1917, and 1918 represents that time period in which it was rebuilt. So even though that is an important piece of the history of this property, it no longer survives. And so therefore it's not included within that period of significance. So we have a very narrow period of significance, or at least more narrow than it would have been had that Adobe property survived. One of the other, critical pieces of writing National Register nominations is that we have to pick criteria that the property is eligible under. And there's generally 4 categories: A, B, C, and D, and then sometimes G, but we won't need to talk about criterion G today. So criterion A essentially is related to properties that have have a significant role in historical events, or historical trends, themes, those sorts of things. And then of course, criterion C is related to architecture, either by a master architect, a representation of a particular style. In some cases, like with the Hayden Flour Mill and the silos and grain elevator is, a sort of a feat of concrete architecture. And so those are the 2 criteria that we used in the National Register nomination to argue for the significance of the property. So under criterion A, the significance of the property, again, as you all are very well aware of, is the fact that it is one of the longest and most successful merchant flour mills in the state of Arizona. And also under criterion C for being the tallest reinforced concrete building within the Salt River Valley. And it was pretty much a feat of architecture at the time that it was constructed. So for example, it was, over 24 hours of continuous pouring in order to construct the silos and grain elevator in 1951. And then just to highlight some of the pictures here. So again, we have a historical photograph of the original mill, and this is in addition to the original mill from 1874. Again, which burned down in 1917. We have a postcard here on the bottom, shortly after the silos were constructed. We don't have an exact date on the postcard, but based on some of the buildings and the models of cars, we're basing that to be in the 1950s, so shortly thereafter its construction. And again, an example of some of the advertising that was seen, you know, for the mill and some of their products. And again, that's in around the 1934 for that. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is one of the things I wanted to talk the most about is the boundary considerations. And so again, you all are familiar with the actual entire parcel that the property is housed within. So there's a 5-acre parcel that the mill building and the silos, you know, inhabit. And so, you know, normally when we're thinking about historic districts, we want to think about what's the original parcel. So we want to make sure that we're not, you know, gerrymandering boundaries, because the Park Service who reviews this does not like gerrymandered boundaries. So we want clean boundaries and logical boundaries that typically follow parcel lines. But one of the concerns about following the original parcel lines is that on average, if you have a historic district, you know, you typically want 51% of the resources within that district contributing. So in the event that something gets demolished or something goes away, that you still have at least half of your district contributing to the significance of history. In this case, we thought about all of those things in addition to what the potential rehabilitation would look like for the historic tax credit. So in this particular district, again, as I noted in the National Register nomination, we do actually have 3 non-contributing and 2 contributing properties within this district, which again, we typically don't see that. You obviously want more contributing than non-contributing. In this case, you know, given just the monumentality of those 2 buildings and just their scale alone, it dwarfs those 3 other resources. And so the resources that are included in this are what we would consider archaeological resources. And so if you had left the boundary at the parcel boundary, then that would have subsumed probably, let's see, another 7 archaeological remnants or foundations. It would also have subsumed a current park, that little pocket park up there in the top left corner, and some other like gabions and other sort of more modern infrastructure. And so all of those things add up to become non-contributing. And so my concern was that you would have a historic district that was heavily geared towards non-contributing resources versus contributing. And so I did not want that to be of any concern to the Park Service when they review this nomination. And so we wanted the boundary to be very tight so that we don't then collect all of these kind of remnants of archaeological resources that get, you know, we do have to evaluate them because they do exist. They're on the property or on the parcel, I should say. But we want to make sure that they don't detract from the significance of the 2 large-scale buildings or, you know, be detrimental in any way to getting this designated. So that's kind of why we have this really tight boundary. In addition to that, the other reason for that tight boundary is because there are, you know, as part of that rehabilitation plan, there is a desire to utilize that surrounding landscape. And so when the Park Service reviews those applications for rehabilitation, they look at the landscape, they look at what's going into that landscape. And so they want to make sure that whatever goes in that landscape is compatible with the history and the size and the scale, view sheds, things like that, of the historic district over time. And so we wanted to do this as well to provide a little bit of flexibility in what that future rehabilitation plan looks like. And so the areas in which the National Park Service, who also reviews those tax credit applications, would look at is much more narrowly focused on the district itself as it exists today, as we assume it will get listed as given the current boundaries. So again, it provides a little more flexibility. It doesn't take a review of the entire parcel off the table, of course, but it does provide a little bit of flexibility. You know, based on our conversations with the developer, I mean, there's no sense that, you know, there's going to be these major large scale, you know, buildings all over the place, that there's going to be a real concerted effort to maintain that historic look and feel of this property. But again, I just really wanted to talk about the boundaries because this is probably the only sort of surprising element of this National Register nomination, was really coming at what a reasonable boundary would be that we could get listed in the National Register. And again, we, like I said, you really can't gerrymander boundaries. So I couldn't just sort of draw boundaries around the two buildings and forget everything else, because we're still going to have to consider them because they are part of that landscape. And it will get considered later on down the line for that part 2 of this project. So if you want, we can just skip to the next slide. We can talk a little bit about that part 2. So as I mentioned, this nomination is sort of the first step towards the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit application. I can talk a little bit about that in case anybody wants a little quick tutorial on that. So the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit applications, that's a 20% tax credit. So that means that 20% of what you have spent, total of what you've spent on a project will come back to you in a tax credit over a 5-year period. After 5 years, it runs out and there's a potential you could do what you want to the property after that point. But in order to get approval for this, it's a 3-part application process. It's very strict. It's very stringent. As somebody who works on tax credit projects on a regular basis, it is critical that you follow the Secretary of Interior standards, that there is historic documentation, that the National Register nomination is utilized in that rehabilitation plan. So things like character defining features, those kinds of elements are included in that rehabilitation plan. So the Part 1 application, which is the significance of the building, that application has already been submitted and approved. That was done prior to my tenure. So that was when there was a discussion of doing a National Register nomination, but it hadn't gone through, but the property was eligible. So the Park Service was able to consider it, even though the building wasn't listed yet. But the point being, to get that tax credit, you're still going to have the building listed. And then the Part 2 application, which is going to be the next phase of this project, which the client and his consultants are currently working on, which is the actual rehabilitation plan. And that will follow once the National Register nomination is approved, and then they can move into that Part 2 application process. Zach and I have participated in several stakeholder meetings, client, brainstorming sessions. They have a really, really amazing architect team. They're very dedicated to the preservation of the mill and the silos and grain elevator. So just to rest assure everybody that, the intent is to have a very, very light touch on both of these buildings. It will retain its industrial appearance, to the extent that that's necessary. There'll be repairs and, and patching and things like that as needed. But again, there's no real intention to do any kind of significant alteration. So the buildings will continue to read as these industrial agricultural facilities. So I have a couple of pictures here just to show some examples of things that they are going to retain. So, oh, sorry, I'll stop talking. I think that was my cue. But there's, as you can see, there's some milling equipment. The plan is to keep some of those within the interior. So they're like art installations. Again, some of those will get moved out onto the landscape. We have an old control panel. We have an example of one of the hallways. So you can see that kind of, industrial appearance. Also the exposed concrete, all of those things will be retained, as well as the safe that's in the wall there. And then there's some, plans for the greater landscape. But again, based on all the plans and the really, really skilled team that the developer has, I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with this property. And I think you guys are going to be really happy with the outcome. They have a really great group of people that are very preservation minded. And so I'm happy to be part of that. And with that, we can switch to the last slide. And then so again, if anybody wants to reach out to me, if you have a question or anything like that you haven't asked tonight, this is my contact information, and I'm with Westland Resources based here in Tucson. So hopefully that was sort of the Cliff Notes version of everything, but happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Levstick. I appreciate the presentation, and the materials are, I thought, very thorough and very well researched and written. I perused the material that was in the packet. So it seems to me that it basically, from my perspective, you have pretty much everything you need for the meeting, which is this week, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's
And
Friday. So I'll be there.
Does that, Dr. Legner, do you attend that meeting, or has the materials already been submitted for the meeting agenda, or?
I plan to attend it, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I do.
And will you, the two of you, be making a presentation at that meeting as well?
I will not, but Ms. Lustig will. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very
so typically they'll give you the opportunity, you have to, fill out a speaker card, but they give you the opportunity to answer any questions that the committee has. So I'm, pretty used to doing this. They typically will have questions. And so, yes, so I will be there, and it sounds like Zach as well. So we'll both be on hand to answer any of the questions that the committee may have.
And Chair, I'll mention too, I've also submitted a letter to the committee, just expressing support for the nomination,
Perfect.
and vouching for, Ms. Lustig as well. Not that she needs vouching for, but just, yeah, very enthusiastic recommendation that I provided to them.
Right. Well, it is a city parcel, right? So, I mean,
Yes.
seems like there should be a city letter. So yeah, that's good to know.
Absolutely. Yep.
Very good. I'll turn it over to commissioners if there's any questions or comments on the materials that you provided to us.
I have several questions.
Yes,
about
go
this.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Levstick, for taking the time to meet with us today. I have several questions. First being, why are the rail tracks non-contributing to this proposed district? As I understand, although they were installed prior to the current mill building, they were installed to service the Adobe mill building, and they were recommended by ACS's report in 2008 to be eligible.
Yes, yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one. So yes, this is not to imply that they are not important. But because of the period of significance, they were constructed prior to the period of significance. And so we have to have things that are built and established within that time frame. I could certainly talk to SHPO and see if they have any concerns about that. I will say that the former railroad tracks will be included in the rehabilitation plan. So there is no intention of removing them. They will stay in place. So you don't have to worry that anything will happen to them. They will get incorporated into the landscape. But yeah, so basically the reason was, they predate the period of significance. So yeah, I mean, I went back and forth on that one too, for sure. So I do understand that.
Although they predate, though, they were utilized while this proposed district became significant. And I feel that you've made it very clear this is being used to go forward with a federal tax credit application. And my concern is that if it is designated as non-contributing, that Park Service is not going to provide it the attention that it should be due. And I believe it does help the proposed district to be able to communicate its significance under criterion A.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand your concerns. I think it really becomes a question to sort of SHPO and to the keeper's office on how they want to treat that. I mean, the direction I was given was that it was not contributing because of the time frame.
Okay. And I wrote some comments, and Zach is going to forward them along. Thank you. With the HSRC meeting, and if it's possible to have that noted there, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Thank you. I have a couple other questions. You mentioned at your presentation here tonight that this is the tallest standing reinforced concrete building in the Salt River Valley. Two things. In your report on page 23, it states that this is the oldest standing reinforced concrete building, and that statement is inaccurate. There is the 1912 San Marcos Hotel in Chandler that was constructed in 1912. And if it is like the tallest, I I recommend that we edit that to reflect its significance accurately and maybe provide some comparable examples in this nomination to compare it to, particularly in the Salt River Valley, when, you know, this would be like in everybody's line of sight during the period of significance. So I recommend revising that so it accurately reflects its significance.
Sure. I will say that that information comes from multiple sources. So that is not unique to me. The work that ACS did out there, they actually did a comparative analysis of other equally tall concrete buildings. And so I'm basing that on the extensive research that they did. But if you can share that information with Zach, and he can share it with me, I'm happy to address it. But again, I'm having a tiny bit of a hard time hearing you, so I apologize.
Sorry, I know I'm soft-spoken and I'm probably far away from the mic. Yes, I have shared that information with Zach. It is attached to my comments as well. I believe there is another older building, another hotel located in City of Phoenix currently that is still standing as well. If you did acquire that information from multiple sources, in the future, maybe we could footnote statements like that with where we got the information. That way I know and I can go look it up for myself if I wanted to. And with that ACS report, this is the biggest thing that I wanted to discuss this evening, is that putting forth this nomination for Criterion C, its importance is derived, from it being, you know, one of the oldest and tallest reinforced cast concrete buildings in the Salt River Valley. But I would like it to be noted too that this building incorporated multiple industrial concepts with its construction. ACS talks about this at length in their second volume, but the interior features that are associated with daylighting, natural ventilation, and fireproofing, I believe should be thoroughly addressed in Section 7, and their integrity addressed as well in Section 7 and in Section 8, about how those industrial features were associated with kind of, you know, coming into the modern era of industry. And I didn't see any photographs of, like, I know there's those fireproofing doors that are in the mill currently, and they have great integrity. I didn't see any photographs or discussion of those. And there's other features that are still extant within the mill, such as the power systems used to power the milling machines via the water turbine. Elements like that I did not see discussed in Section 7, and I think would be important features for Park Service to be aware of. I know you have lots of experience doing tax credits, and they rarely get to come out and visit and see our buildings, but I feel like that would be important information for Park Service to be aware of.
And any other concerns?
My last concern is the discussion of integrity, and particularly for design materials and workmanship. I did not find that there was a discussion about those aspects of integrity, particularly for Criterion C. Integrity is something of design materials and workmanship is something that we would like a detailed discussion of, particularly for tax credit projects. And I saw a great discussion of integrity at the beginning of Section 7 involving the setting of the proposed district, which was great. And it's going to be something that is, as you mentioned, going to have to be handled delicately. But I would recommend seeing a more robust discussion of that physical integrity relative to both the mill building and the silos.
Okay. I'm sorry, and can you repeat your name again? I didn't catch it.
Mariah Justice.
Okay.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioners have any other questions or comments?
Sure. I guess I have kind of two questions.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Lamp. I guess my first question is, so much of the narrative seemed biographical to me about Hayden, and yet we're not checking the box for, historical person here. And I was just kind of curious why that was the case.
Yeah, I thought about that, through writing about it, where it's sort of impossible to just talk about the mill without talking about Hayden. It's so intertwined that it's very difficult to pull him out of that discussion more. But yes, I noticed that myself when I was writing it. So the reason that B is not included is because one, criterion B is sort of a difficult one to use, and you typically only use it when it is associated with the productive years of somebody's life. And while this is certainly the top property associated with Charles Hayden, it's not the only one. He also has his home registered in the National Register. So if he has already been listed in the National Register under criterion B, we can't do another criterion B nomination. So that's one of the weird sort of, things about, using criterion B is that it's like one-stop shopping. You get to use it once and you don't get to keep using it again. And so because he's already been listed in the National Register, for a different property wasn't really available. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank
Yeah.
you. That totally answered my question. And then just one more question, and I am not an architectural historian, so I'm sure there are people here that could speak to this much more than I can. I was curious about the pilasters and the dentils, and if those are typical of the period or the architect or industrial design. And I was really curious about that because of the transition from an Adobe building to something that is something else, and if that shows maybe a local trend.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
just something I was
that
curious
is a
about.
great question. And, I would say that, having those little details like that, at least for like sort of a large scale industrial property, I wouldn't necessarily say it's particularly typical. It does seem like there is just sort of this a little bit of a flourish, a little decorative feature to it. But, as to the second part of your question, I really don't know, because I don't know that we have. I mean, I guess I don't know, but I mean, I don't know if that is sort of a local trend or, signature at all. That is a good question though.
Thanks. So I think there is a move away from Adobe kind of in the late 19th century here, right? For particularly towards Victorian and then neoclassical and eventually Mission Revival. And so I was just kind of curious if that was falling into that, but I appreciate your answer.
Yeah. I mean, I think, the at least the mill building, it's in the right time period in which you probably would have gotten a little bit more of that ornamental detail. Certainly the 50s, there is definitely a move away from that, as you know. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question where we just don't have enough information from the minds of the architects even at the time, to be able to ask them like, hey, you put a little flourish on this one. So, but yeah, it's a good question.
Thank you for the questions. Any other questions or comments?
I have one more.
Okay.
This is Commissioner
Yes,
Justice.
Yes, Commissioner.
I apologize. On page 38, there's mention of the old power station in Kingman, Arizona. It's my understanding that this nomination is being taken forward with a state level of significance, and that is the only mention that I found in this nomination, that whether of comparable properties or even historic context that referred to milling or other industrial buildings within the state of Arizona. And if that information is not there, that's fine. I understand we're not historical wizards and we can't just make things up. But I recommend that we either change the level of significance to local to reflect what's going on in the Salt River Valley, or provide maybe a expanded discussion on either milling throughout Arizona and other industrial buildings in Arizona.
Duly noted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ms. Lovestick, I only had one other, just, and this is minor, but when you're talking about the boundary for the district, and it's good information, and I understood what you were saying, but is there any need within the nomination to show the boundary of the district with relation to the boundary of the parcel, the overall parcel that you referred to?
Yeah, I had very strategically left that out. The reason I've done this is because in the past, when I've worked on similar types of projects where we have a nomination that prefaces a tax credit project where they want some flexibility on the landscape, when the Park Service has been presented with the entire parcel, they like versus not knowing what it is. They typically will come back and be like, we want the whole parcel. And then it really potentially screws up the tax credit application. So I consulted with SHPO on this one as well. And, you know, we all seem to sort of be in agreement to see, I mean, if they come back and they want the whole parcel on there, so be it. You know, the committee, the HSRC committee may want that. But I will say it was a strategic move to not include it. The original maps that we did had it included. But I do understand your point.
Okay, well, that's fine. It sounds like you've actually considered that and you have a good rationale. So that's all I was just curious about. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy enough to put back if that's something that the committee wants. So it's mostly just based on who I know is reviewing it. You know, I'm trying to sort of, you know, kind of do a best guess as to, you know, how they would react to certain things. So, but I will say it's one thing I keep in mind when I write these is that I think about who's reviewing them and what they do and do not like. So that helps.
Very well. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Unless there's anything further, is this an FYI or do we need to vote on this?
It's not required. I mean, the commission could pass a motion, you know, in support of it if the nomination, if you chose, but it's not absolutely not necessary.
Okay.
So I'll just mention though that if any commissioners have received a couple of commissioners' written comments, if any other commissioners would like to provide written comments to the Historic Sites Review Committee, just please make sure you get that to me by first thing tomorrow morning because I need to transmit those to Bill Collins, who's the National Register Coordinator for the SHPO, and he'll be providing those comments to the Historic Sites Review Committee or Commission, right? Committee, yeah. Since Friday is the meeting, and he needs to get those in order ASAP.
Okay. And one more comment. Let me go to Commissioner Williams first.
I just had a comment in the summary in the beginning. Trying to find it here. There was a line that said, you know, the significance of Tempe Butte with the 4 Southern Tribes of Arizona, and then further down in the document under the integrity, it references to the local Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. I don't know if we want it to be consistent with the use of the 4 Southern Tribes of Arizona or just focusing on the local Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community. I just saw the inconsistency in that, but I do appreciate you including the connection that Mr. Hayden had with the local Otham community farmers. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I can address that inconsistency.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner, you have another comment? Yes.
I have a question for Dr. Lechner, if that's all right.
Yeah.
This is a Tempe designated property.
It's designated in the local,
Yeah,
the Tempe
yeah,
Historic
yeah.
Property Register, yes.
That's the entire parcel,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay,
Should
so
be, yeah.
should this nomination go through with the proposed boundary,
Mhm.
those other alterations that the developer is going to conduct outside of that boundary would come forward to us for review?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct,
I
yes.
just wanted to
Yes.
confirm.
That's a
Thank
good
you.
point. Very good point, yes.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. All right. Last chance. Any further comments or questions? Very well. Okay. Well, thank you again, Ms. Levstick. And we wish you luck with the presentation at the meeting and the questions on Friday.
Great. Well, thank you so much for everyone for your time. Have a great meeting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, that was some good discussion. There's a lot of information there. So, and good luck to you too, Dr. Lechner, if there's questions for you.
Yeah.
But I'm sure this will be obviously there's going to be more to this effort after that meeting, but hopefully that will go well.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, moving on now to agenda item 6. This is a request for recommendation of the adoption of a historic context study titled Asians and Asian Americans in Tempe, 1880 to 1980. And Dr. Lechner is the presenter.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. This is kind of long. This is good to be here to talk to you about this. This is kind of a long in the making report. The Historic Preservation Office had, back in 2022, my first year as Historic Preservation Officer, had applied for a $20,000 certified local government pass-through grant administered by the State Historic Preservation Office from the federal government, the National Historic Preservation Fund, and it was specifically for an Asian American or Asians and Asian American context study, which was a suggestion that had been made as a worthwhile study to complete among some other studies in the updated Historic Preservation Plan adopted in June of 2022. So we were successful, unfortunately, in receiving that pass-through grant. We, like for any CLG grant, we had to come up with a partial match, and we did that with some community development funding and some repurposed capital improvement funding. Chronicle Heritage, which you may know better by a previous name, Paleo West, was selected as the contractor. And they researched and drafted the study in 2022 and 2023. So the process, it definitely took a while, but I think it was well worth it. So as you can see, the context study includes a lot of in-depth research. Obviously, there's both archival research. There's just more popularly and easily accessible sources that are included. The contractor also took some additional oral histories from members of the Asian American community. Some had already been completed by the Tempe History Museum, so they actually didn't have to do that many more. I reviewed the study, offered comments on various drafts through the spring of 2024, and the State Historic Preservation Office found the report acceptable and didn't provide the Historic Preservation Office with any comments or any requests for revisions. So we're very pleased about that. So anyway, once we got that back from SHPO, that's when I agendized this item for the upcoming meeting, or this current meeting. So as you recall from reading the report, the historic context, it basically fulfills two main tasks. One is to provide a narrative history of Asians and Asian Americans in Tempe from 1880 to 1980 for that century. And then it also, secondly, seeks to assess the significance and then to provide management recommendations for any properties that happen to be associated with members of the Asian or Asian American community throughout that 1880 to 1980 period. So what staff is requesting from you today is to pass a motion in favor of, or bring a motion in favor of a recommendation of adoption of this historic context study. If the Historic Preservation Commission were to do so, to pass a motion, then the study would then move on to the next available agenda for the City Council, and City Council would actually vote to whether or not to decide to adopt this context study. So, Historic Preservation Office finds the report more than acceptable. Obviously, supports the recommendation of adoption. As I said, the reasons for that are in part because it carries out a kind of a key recommendation contained in the Historic Preservation Plan, and also just because it sheds light on an important community in Tempe that has grown in population and influence significantly, especially over the last 80 years, really since World War II. And so, besides asking for you to make that motion, or also looking for any comments that you might have on the study itself, because those revisions can certainly still be made at this point. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Chair Woodson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lechner. And yes, I agree. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very pleased to see that it's been completed and sounds like it's been through some review already with some various individuals. And I found it to be very interesting, and I think it will make an important contribution. So, but before we move on to considering a motion, let's open up the floor for any questions or comments from the commissioners. Anyone have any questions or comments for Dr. Lechner?
I have a comment I think it's important, as particularly reading through this this draft, that I support that they recognize properties that don't exist anymore. And I know as architectural historians, sometimes that's hard and we get lost in the buildings that are here. And sometimes we think that if it doesn't exist, it's not worth acknowledging. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that was completed, and the impact of this community on our current community is documented, although these properties may or may not exist anymore. So I just wanted to express support for that, and that it was a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, it's good comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions, comments?
I would just say that I was impressed with the amount of detail in the archival research. Would you be the appropriate person to send line edits to? I don't want to take people's time up with copy edits.
Appreciate that, Commissioner Lamb. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Please do send those my way, and I'll make those. Yeah.
Thank you. And any further questions, comments?
Chair.
Vice Chair.
Zach, I'd just like to say thanks for the memories. As I read down through it, especially the properties that, there were so many of them in the downtown that we were involved with as we moved forward with the redevelopment. I remember all the archaeology that was done. They talked about the Peterson Shipman building there on the east side of Mill Avenue. I remember the excitement that everyone felt when they pulled up the ground floor floorboards and found the remnants of the opium den that was dug there. I was still wondered whether Peterson or Chipman even knew it was there. But and there were some nice artifacts that were found, and of course those still resolve in the Historic Museum. So it was a nice piece to remember.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, and thank you too, Vice Chair, for recommending applying for this grant for the purposes of completing this study. So appreciate that.
Very good. Yeah, the good comments there, Vice Chair. I did not know that particular story. That's interesting. Just a question. How many context studies will this make now for the city?
I think that's, I want to say that it's officially, I think it's just 2 at this point, perhaps 3. There's an African American context study. And then we have some other context studies that we're looking if the voters approve the bond issue in November. Some initial context studies, Native American one, and I believe also a Mexican and Mexican American one as well. For
okay.
some reason, I believe that has not been completed at this point.
Okay. All right. And these are city level context studies, correct?
Correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
right.
That's correct. Yeah.
All right. Very good. Okay. Unless there's any further questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion for the item, and there's a sample motion in your agenda.
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair,
make a motion to recommend adoption of the historic context study titled Asian and Asian Americans in Tempe, 1880 to 1980, and wholeheartedly approve.
thank you. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Williams, second.
Thank you. All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. And I believe that satisfies your need for a motion. So thank you very
Motion
much.
passes.
And
All right. 8-0.
our thanks to the authors as well with Chronicle. I thought they did a really good job with this.
Agreed. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, I believe we have one more agenda item. We do, agenda item 7. This is a presentation on a request for proposals for the redevelopment of city-owned land consisting of approximately 0.34 acres located at 401-405 South Maple Avenue, and this is the Hackett House property.
Correct. Yeah, Chair, as you recall, you had just requested a update on this RFP, which I thought was a very good idea, and I felt like it was better just to put it as a regular agenda item to have the ability to discuss it more than we would during a staff update. So I'm just going to share some information here. So basically, the city of Tempe has issued a request for proposals, and this was done in part upon the request of Tempe Sister Cities, which is the community organization that leases from the city of Tempe buildings 1 and 2 you see here on the slide here, which the north building is the kind of the main Hackett House building, and then the building 2 to the south is the old Hilge bakery building, both dating to the late 19th century. The Tempe Sister Cities was primarily kind of looking to be able to expand its event space. So you'll see number 4 there on the map. That is a tent that has been removed, but that was some outdoor space that Tempe Sister Cities was able to use for events. And so they were looking for something maybe a little bit more expansive, something they could have in events indoors, and something more permanent as well. So that's kind of the background for why this request for proposals was initiated. And so I'll go into some of the details about the request for proposals, which you received a copy of, or the copy of, just a little before the meeting. in a moment. But I just want to mention that this is kind of the project area, so the red dotted line. You'll notice that it completely avoids the two historic buildings to the west. So with this request for proposals, there is to be no changes, no alterations, no demolitions, certainly, no impact on the historic structure. So I want to kind of make sure that that's understood. But basically, the properties, any of the structures to the east, including that little building there, number 3, south of the previously tented area, will be demolished, and then a public parking lot to the east will also be incorporated as part of the development area. So this is just a kind of an aerial view that shows the parcel lines there. You can see the parcels. If I can get out my little pointer here, maybe it will allow me to do that. Yeah, there we go. So you can see the parcel lines here. Okay, and you'll notice that that a few of them, that includes the Hackett House, but also portions of the project area have an H overlay. This purplish box indicates a historic overlay. So that's important because what that means is that when there is a proposal, or when there is a kind of a project developed and proposed down the line that is going through the planning process, that the Historic Preservation Commission will have an opportunity to weigh in on that as a result of the property partially, the project area partially being within that H designated or historic designated area. And so this is where the parcel lines end. We're dealing with several parcels that are being kind of put together to make this project area. All right, so I just highlighted section 5, which is the redevelopment project goals. Obviously, the RFP is much longer, but this is really I think the part that is of most interest to the commission. Just so you know, kind of what the city's objective is here. There's really kind of multiple objectives, but one of them is to provide, to encourage the developer to provide some affordable housing units, residential housing units. So as you can kind of see farther down on the slide, the city is interested in, a mixed use, a high-rise project that has residential units, a boutique hotel, possibly, and then also about 3,500 square feet of event space. Okay, and that's space that could be used by Tempe Sister Cities, again, the group that leases the Hackett House and the bakery building, as well as some other community groups. Now you notice that there was some statements here made kind of about the new construction's relation to the historic structure. So as it's stated here, materials on the first floor exterior are encouraged to match the design elements of the adjacent historic structures. Floors above first level should be comprised of modern design elements and materials. Again, that's something that the Historic Preservation Commission will need to weigh in on, again, because of the historic designation on a portion of that project area. So again, just wanted to reiterate that this is not the last time you will hear of this project. It will come back through the commission potentially for certificate of appropriateness, perhaps other either informational or action items as well. So the request for proposals is out now. It was issued just a couple of weeks ago, I believe, and it will stay open for I can't remember exactly when it closes, but I believe it's several weeks that it will be open. And then at that point, a committee will get together, which includes Ambika Adhikari here, principal planner, as well as myself, the historic preservation officer, and other city staff to review those requests for proposals and to make a selection. I believe that's about all that that I have to share with you on that. I wanted to kind of keep that pretty brief and certainly give you time to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Lechner. Very interesting. Let me just first open up the floor to commissioners if you have any questions or comments. And Vice Chair.
I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway, but, you know, after the experience we've had with the Watson's Flower Building and its rush to demolition in the sacred trust of affordable housing strategy, definitely don't want to see that again.
Well, agreed. And here's the good news about that is that first of all, the Hackett House and the Hilge Bakery are city-owned buildings, so that makes it a very different situation. Also, they're both designated in the Tempe Historic Property Register. So if now or at any point in the future, some elements of the city, which I don't think would ever happen, came along and said we want to demolish this property, that has to come before the commission for approval. So it's I understand the concern, Vice Chair. It's a good point, but it's a very different situation for those reasons. Like you, anytime there's development, kind of right next to a historic property, redevelopment, there's always the thought in my mind, or a fear perhaps, of like, what's going to happen to these buildings. There's been absolutely no interest at all in doing anything that would damage the historic integrity of the Hackett House or the Hilge Bakery. So, but again, something that I'll continue to monitor as the plans are hammered out.
Follow up. Is there anything in this document that limits or precludes the Tempe Sister Cities Corporation from being part of the ownership of the new project?
Yes, it's still, well, I'd have to look at that, but there's nothing that when I read through that indicated there was any ownership. It's still, the relationship is still as a leasee, and
A potential tenant.
Yeah, a potential tenant. And there's no intention on the part of the city to change that. I think that the city understands that the Hackett House and the Hilge Bakery are considerable assets. It's the oldest, brick-fired structures, I believe, in the valley. And so these are very, or at least in the city. That's not true. The city, I'm sorry. They're very, kind of unique structures that need to be retained, and I think the city is well aware and supportive of that. So,
Thank you, Zach.
yes.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other questions? Commissioner Kuroka.
I have a few comments and questions. First of all, I'm disappointed to know about this project when RFQ came out. We didn't hear anything about this, especially a couple of meetings has been canceled. There was opportunity to be presented before this got finalized for RFQ. That's my comment. The other thing, I'm just not convinced with these deals, but maybe I just don't know. But when the city tried to get something out of developers, the one I know, we really didn't get what the city wants or what the community wants. For instance, Idea Campus, the expansion of the TCA really didn't happen because of soil condition and whatnot underneath. Also, Farmer Art, I heard there was supposed to be library or some city facilities that didn't happen. So my question is, are there any examples like the setup and actually city did facility realized as a part of development deal? So that's one of my questions. My second, shall I keep going? My second question, so boutique hotel is included, and I heard Hotel Westin is in foreclosure. It seems like a lot of hotels being built, and I'm hearing even more hotels are planned. I'm just curious, are they really occupied and financially stable? Like this one also includes hotels. So that, I'm curious about that. And last thing, this property is really tiny for high rise, and it's just like Gonzalez Martinez house, another high rise overlooming this historic property. I am really concerned what it's going to look like.
Yeah, it concerns me too. I think that's why, you know, that's why HBC's input and Historic Preservation Office's input is going to be so important during the review process when a project is advanced, because yeah, we want to keep in mind like things like ensuring that proper setbacks are maintained to reduce the impact of a high rise on those buildings. Because yeah, I mean the Hackett House is a 2-story building. The Hills Bakery is I guess it's technically two. I guess it was 2 stories. These are not, you know, large buildings, high buildings. So that's something that's definitely we want to keep an eye out on, and we will both as a Historic Preservation Office and as a commission. So I don't know that I can really effectively answer the third and the second question, to be honest with you. I mean, certainly there are other, you know, city properties that, you know, city buildings that have been, you know, constructed by developers. Many examples of that. I'll say in terms of the first question, yeah, I mean, I think the RFP came to me. There was some discussion of this in executive session with council. The RFP came to me kind of fairly late in the process. It was more or less kind of already kind of finalized at that point. You know, we did have community development staff, I believe, in those executive sessions, not me particularly, but weighing in and you know, making the point about the importance of retaining the historic buildings and making sure that we didn't do anything to damage the historic integrity. So so those points were definitely made. And again, I would just say, you know, like I said before, you know, the commission will have further opportunity to review, you know, any projects that come their way. Yeah, or the project, that any proposals, I should say, that come their way in terms of how this property should be, you know, treated down the line.
Commissioner, was that it, or would?
I don't know. I guess Zach doesn't have.
That's the only. I'm
for
sorry.
the,
I know you had more
2
questions. Those are the only. Yeah, that's the best I can answer those questions. Yeah, appreciate it.
Before I move on to anyone else, can I just, so once you do get the proposals, so we will see this, or I guess the one that you all select will see more of that here?
Yes, I think we'll, yeah, we'll have to kind of see. I mean, I think we'll determine kind of how the developer's going to handle that process. I mean, obviously, like with the flour mill, you know, I mean, that was a very, you know, visible project, and the developer chose to kind of go present to each commission and talk about their ideas. What I will do is I'll request the winner, you know, the selected entity for the RFP. I will ask them to come to the commission and present and give the opportunity to the commission to ask questions. And I think obviously the HBC will have the opportunity to just weigh in on how important these buildings are and the importance of not just retaining them, which is a given, but you know, to not doing anything that is going to substantially take away from the aesthetic value of the properties. So once those, just to reiterate, I'll ask them to come before the commission, and we'll get that on the agenda as soon as we can. But that'll probably be sometime later in the year. in 2024, I'm hoping.
Well, I would like to kind of second a little bit of the concern voiced here is, I mean, obviously we didn't have a chance to comment on any of this before it was issued. And I'm finding it a little hard to understand why the city would be seeking such a high-rise development not to exceed 250 feet at 65 dwelling units per acre in this parcel right next to these buildings. I mean, who made the decision to have this developed to that degree?
I mean, that was, I believe, made by council. It was, most of the conversations about this, like I said, were in executive session, so I wasn't privy to those conversations, but this is what came out of it. So I think it was kind of a combination between council input and staff input.
So how many stories would that be if they actually did propose that?
20
stories.
Yeah, 20 stories.
I mean, I don't get it, you know? I mean, are there not other parcels that you could place high-rise stuff, so something like that? I mean, that just seems like it's going to be extremely out of place in this location. And forgive my also commenting that you said it's not going to affect the, you know, integrity, et cetera, of these two historic houses. I don't see how it couldn't affect it.
Well, it
when
will.
you have a
It will to some
20-story
extent.
building right next to it, and also no parking is going to be required. How is that even possible? I mean, where are people going to park if you've got a 20-story high-rise apartment building?
Well, I think the thought, and again, this is out of my area of expertise, but I think in general, you know, for downtown, when there's, you know, kind of, it's going to be the same thing for the mill. The mill is going to have, you know, no required, you know, parking. And I think the idea is that there's plenty of city public parking available on the street and in garages throughout the city to, and this is the idea to, negate the need for further, you know, parking requirements. But now, I mean, to your point, I mean, yeah, it's a tall building. I mean, let's be honest. So I think that, you know, that's why there has to be some diligence on our part and, you know, providing that input where we can to ensure that, yeah, there is going to be some impact. I mean, I don't want to sound Pollyannish about that. I mean, realistically, there has to be when you have a building that tall, but the question is whether the building will be that tall. We really don't have, we have no idea what the design will look like. We don't even have a selected project at this point. And so, you know, that's one of the things that will be considered when the RFPs are, or the proposals, I should say, the responses to the RFP are reviewed, and, you know, something that obviously that will be reviewed throughout the process, including by HPC. So.
All right.
I totally understand the concern, though. I share the concern as well.
Mr. Chair, can I make a quick comment?
Yes, please.
Yep. Very, very important points and discussions, and there's very limited, even I kind of, you know, because some of the processes in the city obviously go through a particular channel, specific important decisions. But just as a planner and someone who has an architectural background, having lived in other places like Boston and, you know, Toronto and other, I think just a couple of quick points that I wanted to make. Looks like there will be an opportunity for the HPC to look at the RFP or any proposal that comes through. That's number one. Number two, typically what happens in this kind of downtown situations is because of the pressure of development, high-rise buildings do get built. And then oftentimes the historic buildings are integrated into the system. Sometimes, you know, it's like the first, second or two floors, and then the high-rise go up. I'm not saying that that's the best option, but I've seen it. I'm just sharing it. The other thing is oftentimes in downtown areas, it's actually, if you can avoid parking in the structure itself, you get a much better design and much more active pedestrian orientation, and the first few floors, which are much more human scales, and people will find parking somewhere else. Like that was the thing in the downtown Phoenix also for a long time. There were parking structures, there were other parking places, and parking was not required for any development out there. So some of these things are kind of, you know, design oriented, probably in favor of doing something good. I know one of the commissioner members is a practicing architect, so I have to be careful on what I speak, but just wanted to kind of share some of my kind of personal observation from here and there, but it'll be an interesting opportunity to look at the actual proposal that comes through and weigh in, and because it's city-owned property, unlike the flour mill, there will be a really good leverage for us to, I think, and the HPC also to put some really good ideas into it.
Okay, thank you, Ambika. I'm just going to point out the sort of divergent approaches that we just saw going back to Watson's. So here you have a 20-story, high-density residential apartment complex, which, by the way, is not going to be required to be all affordable housing. It just says that some affordable housing should be in there, so that's not even a forgiven, with no parking required. And that parcel over there that the city was requiring, all that parking for TCAA to put in for a two-story, what was it? Two-story building that they ended up with, 2 or 3-story building with maybe 40 personnel that would be there on a day-to-day basis. And you saw how much of that property was being required to be for parking. And that was one of the principal reasons why they told us that they were going to have to demolish Watson's, because they had no choice. So again, I get it. I understand that these kind of things go through all the kind of channels and we don't really have any voice or say in that. But when we get the opportunity to make a comment like that, I think it's important for you two, and also looking over there at Jeff and Ryan, why are you guys as city, managers and people who are participating in that planning process having such divergent, directives and requirements? That makes no sense whatsoever to me. And I'm glad here that, again, I get it. I'm pleased that the buildings are already protected and they're not supposed to be part of this, but they will be impacted, even if it's just visually. But nonetheless, I am pleased about that part of it. But it's a little frustrating when we see something like that, no parking required, as opposed to what we just saw with Watson's. And that was the principal reason why they told us that they had to demolish Watson's.
Yeah, I understand your point. I mean, it's also a very different area. I mean, it's a different area. I mean, it's East Apache Boulevard versus like right in the center of downtown, where you have a great
There's a
deal
light
of
rail
access to
right there.
parking.
There was a light rail station with the parking right down the street. So
Right.
that again,
Yeah.
that
No, I
was
don't
part of the
know.
whole, I just felt like
That's
that was all a bunch, I didn't really agree with that at all. And I'm just trying to point out that
Sure.
this is for the commission like us to see this. While it's great that the buildings are not planned to be impacted, and we will see what comes forth with the proposals, and maybe they won't propose a 20-story building, but nonetheless, this is a little hard for people like us to swallow after having just gone through that whole year-long process trying to get Watson's developed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, believe me. I mean, nobody's more frustrated about the Watson situation than I am. So I understand. I appreciate the comment. I do.
Yeah, Vice Chair.
Zach, can you back up to the site plan?
This one, Vice Chair?
Yeah, you're looking at a cluster of buildings that have been there for many years now. And you're also looking at a parking lot. What you're not seeing in that photo is a Southwest Gas 12-inch high-pressure gas line running north-south through that alley parking lot. You're also not seeing a massive 24-foot deep telecommunications complex that runs north-south through the alley right into that Mountain Bell building to the south. The last time we dealt with that telecommunications line, they told us that it would cost $250,000 an hour to displace that line. I don't know of anybody ever moving those. And, you know, they've had a catastrophe in Chandler with that same line where somebody attempted to build over it, crushed it. It cost them literally hundreds of millions of dollars to redo that, let alone all the loss of business and whatnot. So if this RFP is going out and doesn't include those two major facilities in the what's there now review, I think you guys need to recheck that.
It's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, it's something that we'll make sure that staff is aware of. I'm sure they are, but I'll definitely pass your comment along.
Yeah, because
Appreciate it. Yeah.
they're roughly 200 by 200 building site, maybe half of that.
Hmm.
And they may not be able to even do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that's an excellent point, Vice Chair. I appreciate that. We'll make sure that information is available to staff. So.
Well, that's interesting too. Wow. Okay. Any further questions? Yes, Commissioner Justice.
I work across the street from these buildings. And I just wanted to point out that 20 stories would absolutely dwarf not only the historic buildings, but literally everything else around it. And then also, I find it ironic that we're providing affordable housing and then not providing any free parking and encouraging that affordable housing to pay for parking their vehicles. I find that a little ironic. And that's just my comment. I feel like if you're going to provide affordable housing, you should provide people a place to park for free.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, the affordable housing sounds like kind of an afterthought in this proposal. I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, how much is that? It doesn't sound like it's even required. I mean, can you make any comment on that?
The language is that, yeah, it states encouraged, you know.
Yeah, you'll see how that comes down with your proposals, I guess. Okay. All right. Any further questions or comment? We don't need to vote on this. This was just FYI.
Oh, it's just a FYI.
Okay, great.
Can
Well,
I
we approve-
make a comment? I'm sorry, this is
Oh, yes, absolutely, Commissioner.
Commissioner Melcher. I just had a question. Which I already know, but if the buildings in front, the historic buildings are both 2-story, and we're talking 20 stories or less, because we don't know, why would they only make the historic materials on the first floor? It was on your next slide on the last bullet point.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's a good question, Commissioner Melcher. I don't exactly know what the reasoning was behind that, because again, I would have probably worded that language a little bit different, but yeah, I think the idea was on the first floor, because I guess at street level, perhaps I think there wanted to be maybe some more continuity. And then in terms of the floor above it, to provide some differentiation, perhaps from the historic buildings. But again, that's just speculation on my part. I'm not 100% sure. But it's a valid question. I think, again, the design will be important to review, not only in terms of the size of the building and how tall it is, but also and that impact on the structure, but also the appearance of the building and how well it meshes and fulfills that, Secretary of the Interior standards, similar but differentiated, or compatible but differentiated, standard that is kind of guides, every kind of historic rehabilitation or, historic adjacent project.
I would also like to just say that I echo a lot of the other statements that were made. I agree with the majority of what was said about the concerns.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, any further questions or comments? We'll save them for the presenter of the proposal.
more,
For the,
more to come. More
for
to
the
come.
Commission of Skeptical Inquiry. Okay, yes, go ahead.
Mentioning the Secretary of Interior standards, this is a city designated historic property.
Right.
Building a large modern building directly adjacent to those buildings does automatically, it is not in accordance with Secretary of Interior standards because you are altering that setting of those two buildings so greatly. So I do want that noted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, it's a good point, you know, Commissioner. So, I mean, we'll have to we'll have to see what the design looks like, and we'll go from there. But yeah, point well taken. You're absolutely right.
All right. I think everybody's had their say, so we'll move on to the next item, which is chair and staff updates and announcements. I don't have any announcements, but I would like to maybe lodge an update, and I'm going to look over towards Jeff and Ryan here because this goes back to our meeting minutes that we approved from April. The accessory dwelling unit issue. Could you advise us, is that moving forward as you all discussed at that time in April? And is there anything additional we should be aware of?
Yes, hello, Commission. Yeah, we got direction from City Council to move forward on the ordinance draft. So we're working on a draft right now. We hope to make the draft public by early August. Planning to go to Commission, City Council hearings in late August, September, and possibly October. So we're obligated, mandated by state law to get the ordinance adopted before January 1 of this year. So we have to have the ADU ordinance in effect, and we'll be following the state mandated House Bill 2721, which has some specific requirements or limitations on what we can and can't do with ADUs.
Okay. And so do you foresee that going forward as expected, or are there any other issues that have come up?
Oh, yeah. No, it's pretty much as discussed through the hearings, and some of the limitations about concerns about parking. The state's restricted us from requiring additional parking, so those comments or opinions are really out the door because we can't require parking for the ADUs. So although there was a contentious discussion topic, some of those are limited by the result of the restrictions that the state law allows us or does not allow us to regulate. So those will be explained through the process, through the draft, and we hope to have a public review period in the month of August so that we can collect any comments online or at the public hearing, which may occur either in August at the DRC or first meeting in September. We haven't landed on the specific date yet.
Okay, thank you. And if I might follow up, because as you saw in the minutes, we had some discussion of a couple of ideas I suggested for you all to discuss, and there was a mention that you all would discuss it after the meeting. Did you discuss any further about that, about possibly adding any incentives for people who own historic eligible or historic listed properties?
No, that's a good point to bring up. And actually, we'd love to continue that conversation. Maybe we could schedule a meeting during that time period, because we're also, at the same time we're drafting the ordinance, we are working on some research and further research and background of how to create some streamlined processes, or having like ready pre-approved plans that might have some sustainability elements to it. And I think that just what you explained and mentioned at the prior meetings about having historic preservation element or incentives would just go in line with ways that we can help streamline or encourage the processes.
Okay. And when you say maybe have a meeting, do you mean a meeting with the commission, or what did you mean?
Meeting
by
with you
that?
all to kind of discuss
sure.
what
Yeah.
type of boundaries or incentives you're looking to establish as a
Right.
result of ADUs being implemented in the city of Tempe, citywide.
Right. And again, just to kind of reiterate for people who may not have remembered that, I mean, that's, to me, there's a little concern with this because you were talking about initially you're not expecting more than 40 or 50 applications maybe the first year, but that's the kind of program that seems like it could really take off. And, people who are thinking or maybe would not have thought about redeveloping their property or what have you, when they see that opportunity, may jump at it. And the people who would maybe not otherwise be demolishing their historic buildings to make way for other aspects may then be encouraged to do so. So that's why I brought it up. So again, I'd just really like to reiterate that I think that that ought to be at least something to discuss.
Definitely a valid point. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it, Ryan. Thank you. That's all I had. So staff, I'll turn it over to staff updates and announcements.
Yep.
Chair and Commission members, I have a very quick update on the character area, Southwest Tempe, character area 6. We are now pretty close to the finish line. As you know, that we had many surveys and we had several meetings. Now the draft was released on June 14th, so it's out. There's also a survey that's ongoing, which will close on July 22nd. So if you go to characterareas.tempe.gov, there will be a survey if someone is interested. By the way, it's about 80-page documents with a lot of pictures. And with the help of the Historic Preservation Officer and a couple other people, we have about 5 pages of really history of that area, which is really rich. I think it's going to be very important for people to take a look at that. So that's been very heavily emphasized. There is also a historic preservation element. So if you have a chance to look at the draft, although it's 80 pages, the actual text is maybe just about 40 pages. Take a quick look at it, and if you have any comments, let us know, or yourself and ask other people, whoever is interested, to participate in the survey. And then we do want to go to the DRC on September 13th, and we're planning to go to the council on October 3rd for adoption. So that's where we are, another 2.5 months.
Excellent, thank you. And we had a discussion or a presentation on that one, right?
Yes,
that was okay.
yes.
That's right. Good.
I did make a
Excellent. That's
presentation,
good to hear. Thank you. You may already be getting ready to do this, but can you give us a brief update on where things stand with the Historic Preservation Ordinance update?
Yeah, we actually have a meeting tomorrow with the City Attorney's Office. Community Development staff has a meeting tomorrow with the City Attorney's Office to hopefully kind of finalize the draft that will then go back to, well, first we'll go to you for you to review and for you to provide any additional comments on, and I say you, meaning the entire commission, before going to council. So yeah, we're again, I don't know what the city attorney's office will say specifically in that meeting, but we're hoping it's kind of the last, substantive discussion about that with the city attorney's office before we can kind of push it further forward in the review, city council review process. So,
all right. Can you share with us what is the issue that's still being discussed after, what is this now, 6 months or something of discussion?
So a lot of it's just been the delays have just come from the city attorney's office schedule and just trying to review things. I think there's been some questions about we want to make sure we get the language right in the violations section, and basically just providing the city attorney's office just additional information about kind of other municipalities, what's typical in terms of stays on demolition, details like that. So some of it's just kind of back and forth kind of information, and just some kind of unforeseen delays in terms of scheduling more than kind of coming to loggerheads over certain issues, I would say.
I think too, Zach and I discussing this too, we made a commitment to the commission is once we got past, or at least feeling that the city attorney's office was comfortable with our draft language, we would then immediately forward that to you all.
Right.
Have you take a look over it, see if you have any questions, concerns based on those changes, whether you thought they were substantive or not.
Right.
In order to proceed forward with the city council meeting. We're still targeting the late August city council meeting to get this on a first agenda.
Correct.
But we wanted to share that with you, which will probably happen in the next week or two.
Mm-hmm. That's our intention, yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate that. And when you do get the okay to share that back with us, could you please highlight what, if any, significant changes were made from the last draft that we reviewed?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that I plan to.
Okay, very good. All right, thank you.
I don't have any updates beyond that, Chair.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'm not looking at my agenda. Is there a next agenda item or is that it?
Oh, I should mention that too. I apologize. I usually do that. Yeah, we don't currently have anything for on the agenda for an August meeting. So yeah, nothing yet. So as always, if we have no major agenda items, we will cancel that meeting, but not ready to do that quite yet. So.
All right. Any other announcements from other commissioners?
One final question.
Okay, one final question from Vice Chair.
Zach, how do we get to
Oh, well, I think it's only open to city. I believe it's only open to city staff, but I'll double check on that. I'll double check on that. So. Yeah, they're testing me at the end of the meeting here.
Just one last little needle there. All right, well, thank you, everyone. With that having been said, we'll adjourn the meeting tonight at 8:06 p.m. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thanks.